which will have more than 80 countries as member of the committee.
Buenas,
so
gente.
they can contribute and nominate the proposals and
Bienvenidos
projects,
a un nuevo
and we can
directo,
put it
nuevo
on to the
lanzamiento.
Chinese station for flight.
Lanzamiento
The
del
initial
módulo
stage we have
Wentian para la
selected
Estación
9
Espacial
payloads already.
China.
So we're in the second stage of selecting new proposals.
What are some of the criteria for selecting these proposals?
Yeah, I think initially we received over 40 proposals, and it's throughout the world, and it's a very challenging process to pick 9 of them. Yeah, I think it's very. I think the first criteria is the quality scientifically, whether those tasks can only be done in the space or they can also be achieved on Earth, right? So if those experiments can also be done on Earth, there's no reason for us to spend that effort to put it in the space.
Right.
Yeah, and then secondly, since the original international space station was mainly developed and run by the developed countries, for us, so the China space station is also looking into the space efforts from developing countries and trying to encourage the global involvement of space science exploration.
Bueno, estamos en tiempo unos 15
And
minutos.
we, obviously with this Wentian going up there, lots of experiments to be carried out in this lab. And we're hearing the 15-minute countdown now from the space control, the launch
Ahí
control
vemos
center there.
March 5B.
15 minutes to go till launch now. Yeah, so our reporter earlier mentioned that there are 8 experimental cabinets, I think, with this module going up there, right? So what are some of the key technologies that is going up in this Wentian lab?
Well, I think the Wentian lab is basically a biological lab. I think it's using for biological experiments. And some of the payloads and even some of the, let's say, small creatures is already in the fairing and it's ready to be launched. So some of the payloads already been put into the Wentian. We're not waiting for the cargo to bring it. The Wentian segment has already have the experiments on board, and also some of the experiments will be conducted and unlocked and once in microgravity environment. So I think there are a lot to expect, in particular when we see the astronauts open the hatch of Wentian and make sure that these are what we call it bio-support system are working, and also we unlock some of the experiments, put them into microgravity environment. Then we will have some results very soon, 2 or 3 weeks minimum, and we should be seeing some of the interesting experiments coming back.
So actually, Professor Sui, so this Wentian lab module, so it's for the experiments, but actually it also contains a additional living quarters, right, for the astronauts?
Yes. Yeah, this new cabin actually have 3 places for astronauts to live in that cabin. So the maximum amount of capability for our space station is actually 6 astronauts or taikonauts on site. Yeah, but of course we're not planning to have 6 of them in the space for long periods of time. But just
there will
in
be a
case.
handover.
Right.
This year,
Yeah. Right. And in terms of the scientific experiments, I think that there are many fascinating things in the space, but 2 very unique things. One is the microgravity condition, and the second is the radiation. We know that we on Earth, that we are protected by the atmosphere, so we have little radiations. But what radiations can they can harm us, but they may also create some interesting scientific discoveries for us. That's what we want to see in those space experiments. Yeah.
So if you could also just walk us through the structure of this module, of the Wentian module. So there will be the living quarters, also where they do the experiments. But there's also this airlock.
Well, there's an airlock at the segment, at the connecting the Wentian and the Tiangong station. And also there's once you enter it, there's a living quarter at the first entrance, and then there's racks of experiments where we put on slides. It's like a drawer, but it's different racks that can be put on 4 different dimensions. And at the end, it's narrowing down so that we can have also exposed environment. for experiments. And also it's folded with one robotic arm at the end,
El
a smaller
cohete
robotic
mide
arm. And also a solar
53.66
panel. The solar
metros.
panel is deployed, folded
La
and
cofia mide
rolled.
20 metros
So
y medio.
once it's deployed
El
with the
diámetro
16
de la
meter stretch,
cofia
and another side, another 16 meter stretch,
de
the solar
5.2
panel would
metros.
not be overlapped with the another one,
En
so
el
that we
cuatro
do not
booster
have a shadow of the solar
laterales.
panel to the other side. So the solar
Movida
panel
ahí.
will have a maximum generation of power capabilities. So this is the configuration. So the very end is the solar panel. This side is the airlock and docking
Le quiero dar
devices.
From the
un
outside,
crédito con la
it looks like
infografía
a
que
tube.
está
It's like a tube, but the end
arriba a la
is a
izquierda, a
narrow,
Deep Space.
thinner tube, so that can have
Que hoy
exposed
estuvimos un rato ahí en directo por Twitch,
experiments and also have
emitiendo
the
Minecraft,
small robotic
introduciendo
arm
cohetes y
in
esas
addition
cosas.
to the main robotic arm on the
Bueno.
Tiangong module.
So this one is smaller than the one that's already on there. What's this particular robotic arm capable of? What's the intention of sending this one up there?
This robotic arm can maneuver the exposed experiments. For example, we can remove and place a certain experiments on the which is exposed to the space environment. Like Professor said, this is not only microgravity environment, but also for radiation.
Estamos a 10
So there's
minutos para
also
el
radiation
lanzamiento.
environment. So there are different experiments we can do, either indoor or outdoor.
We're at the 10-minute countdown now to launch. Just heard that announced there. Sorry, so Mr. Xu, you were talking about the robotic arm. So it does all the exposed experiments outside the space station. How does it compare then to the bigger one? I mean, in terms of size, in terms of function features.
Right. So this more, I call it small, but it's actually very, it's actually very
Las
large.
laterales
Small in
en
comparison.
China.
Right. So our audience probably have the understanding of a robot arm from the car factories. They probably see from TVs that in car factories we have those robot arm that doing the manufacturing of cars. Actually, these arms are much larger
La
than
estación
those
pasó hace
arms,
unos
right?
minutos, hace unos minutos por encima
But
de
the
China.
current arm in the
Tiene
space in the space station is
dónde va
even bigger.
la
Yeah,
estación.
and it will play a critical
Pasará
role
unos
for
instantes
manufacturing
por Perú,
the space
parte de
station,
Bolivia,
because we
Brasil,
know that we're building a
pues cerca
very
de
complex
España.
space station. Although we have those great tycoons that they can leave the cabin to do the job, but we still want to protect them as much as possible. Yeah, so a lot of work will be done by those robot arm. The big robot arm already in the core cabin, and together with this more robot arm, they will cooperate and collaborate together for the manufacturing, for the building of the space station.
I understand they can also help each other, right? Like
Yes,
fix
they have
any
an
problems
adapter
with
that
each
they
other.
can
Yeah.
use.
It's
They
good
can
friends.
even connect to each other. Yes.
Yeah.
That'd be exciting. So we're looking at these live pictures now from Wenchang
Ahí viene el
launch site.
lanzamiento
This
desde
is the viewing
el centro de
area.
lanzamiento de
Lot of-
satélites
Lots of
en
people,
China.
lots of people gathered there.
Hace un
So
tiempo
when the
venimos
rocket
8 minutos
lifts off, when it actually
solamente.
leaves the launch pad. So I had read before with in the US with the Kennedy
Recuerden, en
Space
tiempo
Center,
menos de un
people
minuto
can feel
pasamos pantalla completa.
the shaking of
para
the
disfrutar
ground,
de
and
este
feel the
lanzamiento.
vibrations from what, a
You-
couple
you-
of kilometers away,
You
right?
can feel
Recuerden que
on your
mañana
chest
estaremos
the
más tarde.
vibration of the
Bueno, hoy
engine.
en realidad.
In particular, this is
Ahora mismo
large,
en Horizon,
larger engine with a total of I think 8 working
cuarto de
engines
la
at the
mañana,
same time.
lanzamiento
So
Starlink
each
es a las
strap-on
10
booster
y
with 2
38 de la
engines.
mañana.
Each engine has 120 tons of thrust. So you can imagine the amount of propulsions and vibration they can
Ahora
create.
mismo está pasando
So
por
it very
arriba de
much depends on
Filipinas,
the
la Estación
distance that
Espacial
you're
China.
standing to the launch pad. The minimum safety is beyond 2 kilometers. So no closer than 2 kilometers can you. So you have to either hide in a bunker
Right.
or you stay beyond 2 kilometers.
So I think there's the crowds that's
So the
waiting
crowd
to see
is
this
about
here.
8 kilometers away
kilometers.
from the launch
And
pad.
they would still feel it there?
They will still feel it. They will still feel the vibration and hear it very loud. It's like a huge firework.
Wow. So that's an exciting moment that they're in for. And I also read that this rocket, when it was moved to the launch pad from where it was assembled and stored, this was maybe a 2 kilometer distance, but it took it 2 hours to reach there. I mean, that is an incredibly slow speed for what this rocket can manage, right, when it actually lifts off.
It's actually walking speed. I mean, I've been following once with this transport of the what we call vertical assembly and AIT center into the launch pad. So that the slow motion is for the safety purpose because it's very tall. It's over 50 meters, and also it is not fueled, so it's not very heavy. So when you pull it to the launch pad, it's relatively lightweight. So with only the weight of the engine and the casing. So once it's on the launch pad, you have to fuel it, and once fueled, it's very heavy.
So we've got the 6-minute countdown now. 6 minutes to go until launch. So with this rocket, you said it's vertically assembled. Would the other option not be an option then? To horizontally assemble it and then try to lift it up, right?
It was horizontally transported.
Okay.
So the purpose for vertical assemble is because the launching status is vertical. So everything is on the vertical status. So when you launch it, it's the same status. But if you assemble in horizontal position, when you put them up, some of the things or small things might change their positions, their connections, or even electronically and mechanically. So vertically assembled and vertically launching is the trend in Europe and in China and US.
Why make things more difficult for
Ho
yourself?
tempo unos 5 minutos.
So 5 minutes countdown now.
5 minutes.
5 minutes to go.
Are we keep fueling at this moment?
I think 5 minutes we're only fueling the hydrogen, and the other oxygens and the kerosene. Kerosene has been already, because it's not cryologic, so it's not cold fuels. So kerosene is normal temperature.
Yeah.
Oxygen has been filled until 7 minutes. 7 minutes to the launch. So 4 minutes or 5 minutes to the launch, we'll stop the hydrogen fueling. So everything is stopped and disconnected, and then we have the unlocking of the launch vehicle.
And is that something that would have happened already, the disconnecting of all the propellant?
Yes, I think it's disconnected already. So, but some of the last electronic segments and also signal transmission and also electricities are still connected until the last minute or last second even.
Right.
Yeah.
And earlier we saw pictures of Chinese leaders waiting to watch the launch as well. And there's
So you see, it's very close to the launching time. So everything is working based on the battery on board. So the battery has its own maximum capabilities. So they have to work all the way until the separation of the fairing. So it's up to the battery to work until that moment. And then before the solar panels is deployed, we'll have to maintain electronically charged vehicle so that we can have signal coming back, and also we can have control of the spacecraft. So it's very important that we have electricities on board.
Right. Mr. Xu, explaining to me earlier about the propellant that's used for the 5B, so on the strap-on boosters. So that's hydrogen, liquid hydrogen, and liquid oxygen.
No, the strap-on is kerosene and oxygen.
And in the
core is the hydrogen.
And so we'll be expecting to see the boosters drop first once launch happens.
So see different colors of flames when it's launched. The kerosene will have relatively orange or yellow color fire, where the hydrogen core engine will have a more blue colored fire. So once you see the launch, you will see different engines working at the same time, but they have different spectrums.
So we're getting very close now to the launch time. 2 minutes and 20 seconds to go.
The weather is great today.
So this would be our prime conditions for launch.
So one thing to remember is that the ground facility for TT&C are all working very closely, including the launch site and also the ocean-going boats that can receive signals. So they have to transmit the signals back, and also for the rockets and also for the Wentian segment. And also we're using the global system of Tianlian to have communications with the station, so that the communications are constant throughout this
En
whole
el lanzamiento.
process.
Right. Well, I mean, when we watched some of the earlier launches before, with in particular the Shenzhou missions, you know, you would hear all the different monitoring posts checking in with the main command center to say that they you know, or that the rocket is on track.
Yes, there are
on the right
different tracking
trajectory.
systems also, including optical, infrared, and TTNC tracking system. All of these are functioning well, including at the launch site and also on other locations where the ground stations exist.
Un
1 minute
minuto.
to go now till launch.
Un minuto.
1分钟，准备，1分钟，准备。
Otro volumen.
接通，允许点火。
1 minute to go. And you know, we've seen so many missions being launched this past year or so. And is this some kind of frequency that you think we'd expect to see carried on for the future of China's space mission?
At least for a couple of years, yes. And also depends on the future programs of interplanetary missions. And also we see a booming private sector that are also launching launch vehicles by
30
themselves.
seconds to go.
Se viene.
So even though there's no crew here, it's not as nerve-wracking as you know, crewed missions, but you can still sense the tension here.
Yeah, we'll have a huge blast off with also lots of water cooling down.
八
So this is the final countdown.
六五四
3,
三
2, 1.
一，点火，点火。
Espere.
So there's a time difference between ignition and ignition itself.
140两两分3两秒负500毫秒，140两两分3两秒负500毫秒。
So people
Wow,
on the beach
that's-
can see it.
Yeah, that's very visible from 8 kilometers away.
8 kilometers.
程序转弯。
So you can see how large the rocket is. Yeah, even from 8 kilometers
文昌
away,
光学
you
雷
can
达
see
跟
the
踪场，
sound.
遥测信号正常，文昌飞行正常。
We just had the announcement there that everything is as expected and
110跟踪正常。
so when can we expect the booster to start dropping off to be jettisoned?
Well, there's a couple of minutes
minutes
into
now.
it before.
317
We're
跟踪
looking
正
at
常
this。is the view from the camera that's on
文
the
昌光学雷达跟
rocket.
踪正常，遥测信号正常，文昌
Saying
飞
goodbye
行
to
正常
Earth.。
So this is the camera that is facing down. You can even
See
see
the Earth from there.
see the
that's
whole
right.
island of Hainan.
阵地112跟踪正常。
So this is the optical tracking system that is monitoring the launch vehicle itself. At the maybe the first minute they can still see it.
And from what we're hearing, everything is as planned,
It's nominal.
going well.
文昌光学雷达跟踪正常。
You know
遥测信号正
the
常
crowd that they
文昌
on the
飞
beach.
行正
There's
常
a hotel called Luneng Hotel. Every time there's a launch, it's fully booked.
I imagine so.
In the hotel rooms, you can see the same view on the facing the south side.
Yeah, I mean, it must be an entirely different experience, you know, seeing it on TV like this, but being there and actually
there. In your-
feeling the launch,
In
right?
your room, holding
Yeah.
a champagne.
Yeah, not just seeing, but also feeling it happen.
Yes, the vibration and the acoustic feeling.
317跟踪正常。
We're hearing more because these are different stations checking
So
in and
on the left side
Into
is
the
the optical,
trajectory.
on the right side is the simulation. So that we can see very soon the separation of the boosters. So from the optical, it will be very, very clearly. So this is the infrared, I think, infrared tracking system.
零水3901跟踪正常。
so the jettison of the boosters
文
should
昌
happen any
光
minute
学
now.
雷达跟踪正常，遥测信号正常，文昌飞行正常。
Trayectoria nominal.
So we have the optical, we also have the radar system,
Yeah.
right?
And if you're just tuning in, we're watching the launch of China's Wentian Space Lab, and that's headed for China's space station.
So the
we
camera
dock
is,
in a few hours,
七
right?
杀3113跟踪正常。
but the fast docking is 6 hours.
6 hours.
6 hours is for the fast docking for the astronauts. But this Wentian maybe takes longer.
Okay.
助推器关机，助推
There's
器
a
分离。
separation of the
Separation.
booster.
That's right. So that's the boosters dropping off.
阵地112跟
So you
踪正
can see
常。
the 4 boosters.
And these would just most in all likelihood just drop into the sea.
Yeah, they're in the Pacific. Yes.
And what will happen to them? Will they get them recollected and?
No, normally we just abandon them. This we'll call it expendable launch vehicle. So
Just abandoned, but
they're
left to float in just wherever the waves might take them.
Drop to the ocean bed, and also maybe good for the coral.
And I guess that's why it's so important that this propellant that it uses is clean, right?
Right. So there's no worry for the sea pollution.
That's right. Yeah. And that's the
ferry. So now the Wentian is exposed to space environment. So the altitude is more than 110 kilometers. So there's no atmosphere at this moment. So the core engine will continue to push the Wentian towards the designated orbit. So you can see that the camera is on board the Wentian, I think.
So now all that's left is literally, we're looking at the payload, which is the lab module itself, and then the first stage, right?
Yeah, and whether that's a moon, I'm not sure.
And when will the first stage separation happen? Would that be quite soon?
That would be around 8 minutes. I think.
What is the timing that's chosen for the first stage separation? I mean, it's when the rocket reaches. Is there a particular
Oh well,
time?
there's I think two reasons. One is the velocity of the launch vehicle, and another is the fuel on board the strap-on booster is burned out. So the strap-on booster do not have a fuel belt connected to the core stage. The core stage is only for hydrogen and oxygen. So strap-on booster with its own fuel and own engines burns out and complete.
That's why it separates.
That will have separations. Yes.
And what about the first stage and the payload separation then? In this case,
that's very much depends on the orbit itself. It has to be inserted to 397 kilometers altitude, same altitude as the station, and then it's like a chasing mode, and then we shut down the engine and let it align with the rendezvous and docking procedures, and that they can conduct an easy rendezvous and docking.
Does that need to be very precise as well? Does it have to reach a very precise?
What we call insertion of the spacecraft, this time is the Wentian into the orbit has to be very precise, because the Wentian itself do not have a very big maneuverabilities in orbit. So it relies on the launch vehicle, at this time Long March 5B, to put it on the right location at the right altitude. So it has to be the same orbit as the station, so that it can conduct a rendezvous and docking.
Right.
So the Wentian itself is not designed for maneuverabilities. So we have to have a very precise insertion of the orbit.
So it's not designed for maneuverabilities, but I was reading before that the Wentian also has a lot of functions that's the same as the Tianhe, right?
Tianhe has, I think it's just part of the station itself. If it's not connected to the Tianhe, it's not going to function well. It has to be a closed cabinet with the life support system on, so the astronauts can attend those experiments. So the similarity is the size itself, and also the rendezvous and docking mechanism. But the Tianhe has many docking and docking modes and locations. Even on the rear, it has a docking for the cargo ship, and front and the lower part has the Shenzhou dockings. So this time is have a direct docking, and then the Wentian will be moved to the side. So we'll have a sagittal connection afterward.
But it can also be used as a backup for Tianhe in terms of propulsion, navigation functions, right?
Well, I think there are many functionalities on board the missions. The design concept is always what we call a redundancy. You have an emergency in Tianhe, you can move the astronauts to Wentian for life support, for maneuverabilities, and for escape purpose. But fingers crossed, we have a good connections and good functioning station. So those system would be, we'll call it a redundancy system or backup system instead of just in emergency cases.
Señorita,
So this
Right,
is
that's
separation of the
First stage in the payload.
Wentian.
You can really hear the applause there. I mean, that is a pretty monumental moment, right, for the rocket launch.
You can see once the separation is conducted, there's a little bit tumbling of the spacecraft. So we have to use some of what we call it attitude control engines to make sure that it has a right attitude
Este
and
será el segundo
position
de
before it's
3
rendezvous dock.
módulos.
So this is what we call a successful
El tercer módulo
launch
está
itself,
planeado para
the
que en
separation
mayo
of the launch
entonces,
vehicle with the spacecraft means the launch vehicle has completed its job.
octubre.
That's right, and so now all we're
Lo hubiese
seeing
escuchado.
is just the Wentian module itself.
Pero bueno,
And then
no,
So the next job would be deployment of solar panels, I think,
decía de los
to
chinos
generate
ahí,
solar,
cogías una emisión
solar
directa,
powers so that can have a sustained
me
electricity
gustó
on
más que
board.
una
the
de
mission.
Ariane
and is
Space.
that the solar panels, are we seeing that there on
voy a
the
decir la verdad.
screen?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
on the middle side there's a
cohete.
small solar panel for
Right.
the spacecraft itself. And then there, you can see there's a thinner part. The larger part is for rendezvous and docking. The thinner part is going to be for the robotic arms and the solar panels in the future. So the big solar panel for the station will be on the right side. So in the middle is the solar panel for this mission itself.
And these solar panels will essentially be generating energy for everything that's needed in the Wentian.
Yep.
In the station
in the
itself.
in the station. And that's enough for all these experiments that's needed to be conducted there? Just using these solar panels?
Well, the solar panel is just, this is just 50%. There's another segment is coming. So the solar panel is very big. It's folded and you cannot see it. But it's once it's deployed, it's larger than the spacecraft itself. It's very, very big solar panel of 2 rails. And it's very efficient in generating powers, over 30% efficiency.
So earlier you were saying that this is the backup, right? So in case something goes wrong in Tiangong, so what would happen in that scenario? All the astronauts would move to the Wentian lab, and then would it be able to detach from the space station? And
They shouldn't detach it because if you detach it, you don't have a mean to come back to Earth. You have to use the capsule in case of emergency. So the first thing, in case of fire or leakage, you have to go to the capsule for emergency cases, to the Shenzhou capsules. So those are the only thing that can come back to Earth. This system is, but if you have a smaller problems like air leakage or a small fire, you can put them out, but you can escape to Wentian for temporary purpose before you go back to repair it. So there's a number of airlocks that you can use to lock yourself inside. But the main escape route is the Shenzhou capsule, and the 2 segments has to work together. So that, but there's a number of airlocks that you can use to separate the different environments.